Hi, this is Zachary Ring from Thea Enterprises. If you haven't watched our other how-to videos that cover basic manual and automatic sequences, be sure to check those out first. When I talked about manual sequences before, I shared two examples where we used a single keypad button to cycle through several colors of light. In one example, we cycled through several saturated colors, and in the other example, we cycled through several colors of white light, like in the sequence shown here. One thing I mentioned about manual sequences is that they always pick up where you last left off. For instance, if I used our keypad button to advance through the sequence here, and I ended at 3200K, my next keypad button press would always take us to 4000K. This may be okay for certain applications, or even desired, but other times we might want to find a way to reset this sequence or take us back to the beginning. For instance, if I left the living room and pressed the room off button, I might expect this sequence to always start with the warmer color temperature of light. Another example that illustrates this well is an example that I used to share when teaching HomeWorks qualification class at Lutron. In this example, we have an art gallery with several paintings on the wall. The homeowner could use a Pico remote like a clicker to cycle through these paintings, illuminating or highlighting one piece of art at a time. If the homeowner left off in the middle of the sequence and then left the space, we would want the room off button or maybe even a vacancy sensor to reset this back to the beginning so that they can always start their show with the first painting in line. This can obviously be done by writing some conditional programming, but I'm going to show you a much easier way to accomplish this in our video today. For our example, I'm going to use the living room CCT sequence that I previously created. As I mentioned before, if you're not familiar with how to create a basic manual sequence, please refer to our previous video. The trick or secret behind getting this reset to work easily is somewhat counterintuitive. We actually have to change our sequence type from a manual sequence to an automatic sequence. Even though we're going to advance through these steps manually and we're not going to utilize this function here, we need to change this to expose the stop sequence option. The reason we need this option exposed is because stopping the sequence essentially resets the sequence, allowing us to start at the beginning. If we want this to function like a manual sequence, there's a couple things we need to do first. First, I'm going to move over to catcher groups in the living room because that's what we're controlling, just to make it easier for everybody to follow along. But I am going to deselect this option here. We don't want to automatically advance through these steps. We want to press a button that's going to take us to the next step. All right. The other thing is we don't want this to automatically stop. We are going to have a HomeWorks input action like a button press or a space going vacant take us to the stop sequence action. So we are not going to select anything here or here, and we're not going to program any kind of action on the stop sequence tab. Next, we need to assign this sequence to a button press, just like we would with any basic manual sequence. What's different is we need another button or another input action to stop the sequence, which will reset the sequence. To do this, we'll navigate to Program Devices, and we'll use the living room keypad for this example. We'll start with our sequence button, which we'll call Color Temp. And remember, even though we're going to advance through this sequence manually, it's found under Automatic Sequences. We'll use Sequence Start/Next for the setting. Our button type will be Single Action, and for the LED logic, we'll use Momentary On when pressed. Then, our Room Off button will turn off the lights in the room, but we also need to stop our sequence with the room off button. That's what resets the sequence so that the next time we come into the room and press this color temp button, we'll start back at the first step with that warm color temperature setting. When I was talking about the art gallery example, I mentioned being able to reset the sequence using a vacancy sensor, so I'll quickly show you how to do that now. First, we need to change our art gallery sequence to an automatic sequence to expose the stop sequence function. Then I need to deselect this automatically go to next step option on each tab. Then I'll go to program occupancy to program the sensor. I go to my art gallery sequence, and on the unoccupied tab I want to select sequence stop. Then one important thing to note is that HomeWorks will automatically attach this function to the occupied tab. I can't just deselect it here because that will deselect it from my unoccupied tab. So I need to actually use the unaffected option here. If I don't have any other actions to attach to the occupied tab, like turning on lights, I could also just change my sensor type to vacancy only. If we didn't have a sensor in the gallery, or we didn't want to compromise the aesthetics by adding a visible sensor, we could also use a function called Rollback to reset the sequence. Rollback is only available in areas that don't contain sensors, so first I have to remove the sensor from the gallery. Back on program occupancy, you'll see that the gallery is no longer available. That's because I need to select this option here, show areas without sensors. I'll go back to my art gallery and enable rollback for this area. Rollback will perform the unoccupied action after the total timeout has elapsed. Changing the zone level of any of the loads in the art gallery will reset the timer here. The total timeout can be adjusted by using the drop-down menu, or you can type in a value here. Whether you're dealing with rollback or sensors, it can be advantageous to give the user a way to override this function. I've created a variable with two states for this gallery timer, enabled and disabled. We can program the system so that this function only works when rollback is enabled, and then we would give the user a way to easily set this state to disabled, like pressing the button on a keypad. This would be advantageous if the user wanted to entertain guests in the gallery for a significant period of time without changing the state or levels of any of the lighting loads. This same logic can be applied when working with actual occupancy and vacancy sensors, and I'll outline how to do this in detail in a future video. To be sure that you don't miss that video or any of our other future videos, be sure to subscribe to the Thea Enterprises YouTube channel and use the bell icon to be notified every time we upload a new video. Once again, my name is Zachary Ring. Thanks for watching.